Just a quick reminder before we start this week's show, the Southampton Women's Football Club has reached another Hampshire FA Cup final. They'll be taking on the Portsmouth FC ladies at Hammond and Waterlooville FC at 7:45 on Wednesday, March 28th. So head down to Portsmouth, wear red and white, make the girls feel at home, and help them bring home another trophy. And in case you were wondering, in their last 5 matches, they've scored 19 goals and allowed just 1. All right, now here's the show. You're listening to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans.
We just got to go out and express ourselves.
Fonte with a scooping header.
We just got to get the job done. I'm here to get the job done.
Отдача, Остин! Все-таки забил!
It's infield to Mane, 25 yards out. Lovely ball for Pella. Onside, 1-0! Buffon shot! Oh my word!
Unbelievable. He ran around the pitch like Bambi on ice. It was very, very embarrassing to watch.
And now, your host, Matt Markstone. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans. My name is Matt Markstone. I'm the host of the show, and no matter where you are, no matter how you may be listening, thank you for making the show part of your day. I hope that you enjoy it. Since last week, when Mauricio Pellegrino was sacked mere hours before the show was due to come out, we have now appointed Mark Hughes as first team manager. And the episode was set up, this interview that I had this week was set up for over a month now. I was supposed to meet with Dave Lee, who is on Twitter at AODaveLee. He is a podcaster. He runs the Waves of Tech podcast and is partially in charge of Modern Life Network, which is on Twitter at Modern Life Pods. But he is one of the closest Southampton fans to me in space, in time. And if I'm ever going to see one, he might very well be that one. But we were due to be at the same conference at the same time, and we decided we would go ahead and watch the match together on Saturday. We were scheduled to play Swansea at the time, 8 a.m. kickoff. We'll get together, we'll watch the match, we'll go to the conference. After the conference, we'll get together and we will record. But of course, we did not play Swansea, and we played on Sunday, which meant we were already home. But Dave and I still managed to set aside a few minutes during the conference to sneak into a corner of a room and record a little bit of his story and talk about the appointment of the manager. And that's mostly what this week's show is going to be about, because most of it was recorded while I was on the road. I had some callers who called in, who left me voicemails, and it was great because I got to hear from some of you, got to hear your thoughts on the manager. And it was great. And of course, it's always better if I actually get to talk to you, because I do actually enjoy talking to other fans and hearing their perspectives. But this, for me, is the next best thing. So on today's episode, we have a few short voicemails from different callers, and we'll get to those before we get to the interview with Dave. And then I have the interview with Dave. And then I was presented with the opportunity to speak with Jim Salveson, who is on Twitter at Mr_Jimbob. He is a radio presenter out of Manchester. He hosts and writes the On the Left Side podcast, produced for Abrupt Audio, which is run by Chris Huskins and Ant McGinley. And Ant also helps with the show. He helps write and produce it. And Ant was actually the one who suggested to use SpeakPipe, which is how I was able to record some of these voicemails from people. So special thanks to him for setting that up, and also for setting up the interview with Jim. And of course, Jim hosts the show. He hosts On the Left Side, which is a funny football show. It takes a look at actual kind of stories in football and kind of makes fun of them. And it's a podcast that I do listen to. And it's something that I look forward to because it's unlike anything else that is out there. So if you're looking for something new, something funny, something short, something insightful, I'll let Jim tell you all about it, but the links are in the show notes, and they are on Twitter at On the Left Side. I highly encourage you to give him a follow and enjoy what's going on there. But before we get to any of those interviews, we're going to jump into the voicemails that we got. We have 3 voicemails on the hiring of Mark Hughes. We have one from Alex Hammond, who's been a guest on the show before. He is at St. Hammond. We have one from Jamie Grant, who is at Granty_SFC, who is the lead admin for the Saints Report, which partners with this podcast. So for all of your Saints FC news and needs, be sure to get in touch with the Saints Report on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. You will not be disappointed. I think you'll be entertained. And Jamie is the man kind of that behind that, who started that and who runs that. And we are official partners kind of with them. And the last voicemail you hear before we get into the interview with Dave is from Tim Marshall. Tim has been on the show before. He's got a little bit of a cold. And I should tell you that sometimes the quality of what you're going to hear today in terms of audio clarity is not necessarily what I would consider to be normal for the show. I think the show normally comes across fairly clear, but we are dealing with internet stuff, and I'm in hotel rooms and conference rooms, and there are people yelling, things like that in the background. So not always as nice, not a really controlled environment, but we do our best, and I hope that you still enjoy it. And I think the content will kind of make up for maybe the sound quality if it is not as good as normal. But anyway, enough of that. Let's get to the calls. And first up is our message from Alex Hammond.
The more I thought about it, the more it made sense to appoint someone like Mark Hughes. He isn't the most exciting of managers, but in the situation that we are now, we have to accept that experience is the most necessary skill of the managers out there. Marco Silva would have been a long-term appointment. Mark Hughes for the 8 game. It's been announced that it's till the end of the season, so it's undoubtedly just to try and keep us up. With someone of his experience, never been relegated as a manager. And also the good thing about Hughes is that he won't tolerate any nonsense from anybody. So he'll whip those players back into shape to play some good football. And if they don't play the way that he likes it, then they're just not going to play. Because the thing with Pellegrino was that it seemed that he was a little bit overpowered by players. But I think it's a good appointment for Southampton. It'll definitely be short term, just to try and keep us up, and then we'll take it from there, I think.
I'd like to thank Alex for taking the time to call in with a kind of well thought out and reasoned view of the manager. And I have to agree with large parts of what he said. Mark Hughes has some history. He should be able to gain the respect of the locker room. But now let's go ahead and jump into a call with Jamie Grant. You can find him on Twitter at Granty_SFC.
I definitely think that Hughes is a good appointment for the short term. Obviously, we've got to be realistic and think we are 17th more than 7th. Already by his initial interviews, I can see that he's going to give the players a real rocket. Got a good game coming up against Wigan to hopefully go through to the semi-finals, and then we've got a crucial run in, and hopefully by the end of the season we can stay in the Premier League, and then we can review our options in the summer going forward. And so hopefully it's a good appointment for Saints.
And thanks to Jamie for doing that. And I have to agree with him in large part that the appointment of Mark Hughes is something a little bit different. It's definitely a focus on the short term, and we have to be aware of what we can attract at this point in the position that we are in. Marco Silva doesn't stand to gain a lot from maybe coming to Southampton now and attempting to keep us in the Premier League. He would, in a lot of cases, would stand the opportunity to really hurt his reputation by doing that. So although we would have wanted a manager like that, we're not a very attractive option at the moment. And so Hughes definitely has something to prove. So hopefully he can come in and do that and motivate the players for the 8 games remaining. And of course, Jamie made that call, and I asked for the call well before the Wigan game ever happened, but we'll get to that. We have one more call after the other 2 longer interviews from Dan Jarvis, who will kind of give us his recap of the game against Wigan. So we have one more phone call before we jump into the longer interviews, and this one comes from Tim Marshall. He is at Tim J. Marshall on Twitter. He's been on the show before. Phone call. Anyway, you'll notice that the quality towards the end had deteriorates a little bit. I think it's just the connection that was there. Nothing anybody could do about it. So that's just a quick heads up, but it won't take away from what Tim has to say. So here's Tim Marshall on what he thinks about the appointment of Mark Hughes.
Hi, this is Tim from London, friend of Matt, friend of the show. My comment is about Mark Hughes. Just to say that I think it's really important we welcome him St Mary's with a huge roaring ovation. I think that Pellegrino got a slightly sort of lukewarm at best, sort of indifferent at worst reception, and it really sets the tone to have a really strong unanimous backing for the manager from the outset. So I hope that at the Wigan game away, but more importantly, first time he's presented the home crowd at St Mary's, we really give him that massive St Mary's roar to start on the best possible terms.
Special thanks to Tim, Alex, and Jamie for calling in. Their Twitter accounts are in the show notes, so be sure to give them a follow if you liked what they had to say. And honestly, in all the kind of negativity that's been out there on Twitter for the past, 18 months or so, it's nice to hear some positive views coming out of it. And whether it's just us wanting to be positive because we've been kind of shown negative things with the football club for so long, whether we're looking for a reason to be positive. But whatever it is, let's hope that it's correct. Let's hope that Hughes is the man that can lead us to safety. With the squad we have and the leadership that I think he has, I think we'll be okay. But as you'll hear later, at least one guest maybe doesn't share that. And if you read what Joey Barton said, or you heard what Joey Barton said Monday morning, we are, as fans, we don't have that maybe same knowledge or understanding of Mark Hughes, but Joey Barton said what he said, and Stoke fans have said some things that were pretty similar, and we'll hear from the perspective of some Manchester fans a little bit later about his tenure there. So anyway, let's jump into my interview with Dave Lee. He's at AO Dave Lee, and I think I mentioned at the top of the show, but he co-hosts the Waves of Tech podcast and helps run the Modern Life Network. All the Twitter accounts to all of those things are in the show notes if you're interested in technology at all, current technology stories. Dave and his dad do a fantastic podcast, been going for like 10 years, which is, really before most people knew what a podcast was, but they've been doing it for a long time. It's worth checking out. I've been a guest on that in terms of talking about my work and school and things like that. So that's all there, and I enjoyed it. And so let's go ahead and talk to Dave. Remember, we're in the corner of a conference room. One guy that I actually know that knew we were recording still decided to yell to his friends on the other side of the room. And he's running for a position that I get to vote for. I will not be voting for him. No, I didn't tell him that. Yes, I'm passive aggressive, and I don't care. But here's my conversation with Dave Lee. Enjoy it. And special thanks to Dave for taking the time to talk with me after a very long day of work at a conference. Well, Dave, hello.
How's it going, man?
I'm all right. We are at the Q conference, and this is like only one of the probably fourth or fifth time that I've ever met in real life another Southampton fan. And we're not, one of them was next to me at a different football game, and he kind of reached over, saw the jersey while we were urinating next to one another, and showed me the crest tattooed on his chest. So that's not how we met, and I'm kind of glad.
Yeah, that's a different story. We met, I just checked out your podcast one day, and then we connected, and you've been on my podcast. You're actually the first Southampton supporter I've ever sat down and talked to. So you got one up on me.
And it's fun because it doesn't happen this way all the time. Usually I have to interview people over Skype, but when we found out we were going to be here at this conference, at the Q conference in Southern California, at the same time, we were both kind of excited. And unfortunately, the game has been moved to Sunday, and we'll be home already. But otherwise, we were going to try to catch that together. But this is a good chance for us to kind of just talk a little bit about the team. And basically, just want to ask you, how did you come to be a Southampton fan? Well,
in 2014, I kind of caught football fever after the World Cup. The U.S. had a decent showing, at least. And, I'd sort of been a fringe football supporter for a number of years, back 2008, 2010, watched a little MLS, didn't really watch any international football. And so once I kind of got that fever back in 2014. I started searching around saying, okay, which English clubs do I want to follow? Which German clubs do I want to get to? And I just started doing an internet search and checking out social media, and just kind of came across Southampton and read about their history, checked out their roster and some of their moves, and just read a bunch about the club. And I just fell in love with it. I liked what they were doing as a club. I liked that their academy was so strong. I enjoyed what the Southampton way was about and sort of the origins there. And that's how I came to be a Southampton supporter. I think a lot of fans, as you've mentioned on your show, I'm not sure if I chose Southampton or if Southampton chose me as a supporter. So I've been a supporter almost about 4 years now.
Yeah, and it's been a good 4 years for the most part. Well, maybe not the last two, but it's okay. I mean, in the end, it's still fun to root for them each and every week, even if the results don't really go our way. But Yeah, obviously this week there have been a number of changes. Yesterday on my way down, from Santa Maria to Palm Springs, they announced that officially Mark Hughes was the new manager. But before we get to that, I guess the, Mauricio Pellegrino has gone. I think most fans have made their feelings, known, about that, and they are glad that he is gone. And I have to kind of agree. I think it was time, especially after, the last couple of weeks of performances. I think it was maybe, they were definitely unacceptable, but I think that even up until that point, he probably needed to go. But what are your feelings on the manager kind of being released and then the new signing of Mark Hughes?
Yeah, I think like Pellegrino, just like most of our other supporters, I was a bit relieved when I got the news. I actually didn't hear until later that evening on Monday, and maybe it was Tuesday, but it was welcome news. I think we are all struggling to find a reason to get behind the team. You know, there's different reasons we support the team, whether it's the players, whether it's, you know, the history behind it, whether it's the manager. I was relieved for a number of reasons. I always think that when managers are leading their team and you can tell that the players aren't playing for him, that he's sort of lost the locker room, if you want to say that way. And I think when head coaches are doing more harm and having more detrimental effect than they are good on the squad, that's about time when they need to leave. And I think it should have happened, as you guys have talked about, around the winter break. He was on a short leash, give him a couple more games, but I think I was pleased with the firing because we just weren't seeing any progress. You know, with Carrillo coming in, Gabbiadini on the bench, Long, you know, James Ward-Prowse was coming in. You were seeing some progress with him, but you haven't seen Boufal really thrive. You've seen Tadic drop off the last couple of years. Some of that's, of course, on the players, but, you know, the managers are there to sort of infuse and to create an environment for players to thrive. And I think we've been stale going back to middle of last year in really getting our talent to push beyond their own limits. And for that, Pellegrino, I just never... I was optimistic at first, you know, coming in. He was a very unknown quantity. I mean, he had some experience in the first division, but it's a different ball game, and results matter. And we unfortunately didn't get anything from him. So I was relieved. I think it was well overdue. But, you know, whether he was in there or not, you know, I was going to be there every Saturday or Sunday cheering on the team and hoping for something different. But I think that Newcastle, obviously, it was the last straw.
Yeah, and it's probably the manner of that defeat more so than just the defeat. It was the fact that all of the everybody looking at them and saying the players, you know, there's a divide there. The players aren't clear as to what their jobs are. Something's not quite right. And I think that performance just epitomized all of it because none of the players, they seemed to give up as soon as that first goal went in. And it was very clear that they were never going to get back into it. And I don't know if that's kind of what you saw or that's how you...
Yeah, that's exactly what I was, and that's exactly how I felt. You know, that when you look, you're watching TV and 67 seconds into the game, it's 1-0. And you're already thinking, should I even stay around for the next 88 minutes? And that's a terrible feeling to have as a supporter. I know I'm going to sit through it, but you know, based on our history of this year and basically the last 10 games of last year, you know, we're not going to be competitive when we even go down 1-0, 2-0, when that third 3-0 happens. You know, it's pretty much lights out, days over for us. But it's a terrible feeling to have. I think we've all been on the high for Southampton for so long under Koeman, and it was just a difficult display to watch when there are basic defensive mistakes being made. Individuals aren't reading the plays. The other team is just on top of us, you know, throughout the full 90. So that's what I felt. I think it was a harsh reality to sit there and just look at a team that we know has so much potential, that play on so many national teams, that have the ability to be a top 10 club year after year in the league, and to see the way they played and to see the mannerisms and the expressions on their face. It hurt me to see them on the pitch like that.
Yeah. And now moving forward with Hughes, he has said today, I probably shouldn't know this since I've been at a work conference all day, but I have been checking. He said he would take the FA Cup seriously. And we'll see. Well, obviously, the Wigan match hasn't happened at the time of talking, but, with 8 games left to go in the Premier League season, do you think a manager like Mark Hughes, a manager who, coached Stoke to 3 straight 9th place finishes, then a 13th place finish last year, and it was eventually released by them, this year but do you think he has what it takes for, the team to stay up and be in the Premier League and really just push us through this last 8 games.
I was pessimistic when Pellegrino was still in that we were actually going to stay in. I for sure thought we were going back down the Championship, and that was disheartening just to come to reality against. I'd been fighting it for so many months, and now with Mark Hughes in place, at least I have some. I'm naturally optimistic. I prefer to have that optimistic, positive mindset. Yes, he has 3 ninth place finishes and 13th place. Given the time frame and with only 8 games remaining, I think he's one of the only options, but also probably one of the better options. Is he potentially the guy that's going to save Southampton come next season? That's unknown at this point. But I think given the dynamics, we needed somebody that had Premier League experience. We have someone that, coach managers are hired to be fired, and, that's the nature of the business. So I think Mark Hughes is at least the adequate replacement for the time. I don't know too much from his work with Stoke as far as his tactics, how that's going to be managed with our talent pool at the time. But hopefully a new face, a new energy, some new coaching staff can go in there and sort of infuse some honor back into the game and just sort of revive those players. And I know the players need it, the fans need it. And it took the board long enough to make this decision. And I think we've all been wanting that for a number of years or this season. But yeah, Mark Hughes is I think an adequate replacement given the conditions and where we're at right now.
Yeah, for me, one of the things that I was thinking about is our last 4 managers have been somewhat relative unknowns to a lot of English fans, a lot of myself, and I'm just talking fans of the English game, I guess. And Koeman was a great player. Pellegrino has a playing career. Puel had a history in France, but we didn't really know about them. And now this is a shift because now we've kind of, I guess you can look at it a couple of ways. Have we slid back from challenging for Europe into now we're mid-table and we're just going to enter that kind of managerial merry-go-round? Or is this a stopgap because this is what we have to do? And I think that's what it is. And I think that's okay. But it also maybe to me signals a bit of a change. And if we see this next season going forward, where we stick with another kind of relatively well-known manager, that would signal a change to me that I'm not quite sure how I feel about yet. And I'm also exhausted from today, if you can't tell.
No, it's an interesting discussion to have. I've always been fearful that Southampton was going to be, after we fired Puel at the end of last season, after a decent season. EFL Cup final, eighth in the league. You can question, of course, how they played the last 10 games of that season. But once we fired him, I was afraid with this new appointment of Pellegrino, what had occurred is that we were going to be one of those bottom of the table teams that cycled through managers like 2, 3, 4, 5 within a 3-year period. I know supporters don't want that. The club doesn't want that, but that's my fear. We've seen it with the likes of West Ham now. We've seen it with Stoke. We've seen it with Crystal Palace. We've seen it with Swansea City. I don't think that's what supporters want to be associated with. And like you said, it's more of a stopgap. It gets you through, but year after year, it's that challenge. And, a lot of people say the promotion relegation battle is exciting for fans. I have found it the worst thing ever. I don't find anything exciting about it. It's depressing. It's absolutely. It's anxiety ridden. It's just one of those things. Yeah, maybe it's good entertainment for a lot of people, but for those that love the club year in and year out, it's the worst possible thing to be a part of. And of course, when I go to the pub to watch other football with other friends, they're like, "Hey, what's happened to Southampton?" You have to take that upon your shoulders as a supporter. But I'm going back to the stopgap. I think that's all it is. I think it's just enough to save us in theory. Whether Mark Hughes is that known quantity that's going to get us back into that top 10, because I still believe honestly that we have a really strong squad, really good young talent. We have some good supporting cast that are on the bench, good academies. I think we are still just missing that leadership component that we haven't seen since the departure of some of our well-known players. So if Mark Hughes can find that player, or if next season we have that caliber of player that comes in or takes over the reins, I think we'll be in a much better spot.
Absolutely. I know we mentioned before that you have a podcast, and where can people find that, and how do they get in contact with you on Twitter?
Perfect. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at AODaveLee. And I have a tech podcast called The Waves of Tech. My father and I do it. We've been doing it almost 10 years now. And you can head over to modernlife.network, and it's a network of podcasts. you can go over there. We talk about all things tech variety. We talk about technology in the space industry, education, healthcare, social media, business acquisitions, net neutrality. We talk about it all. So the waves of tech, you can just search for us. You'll find us.
And one more Southampton question. Will we stay up?
We will. Yeah, I was, as I mentioned, pessimistic with Pellegrino around. I had no faith that our squad. The only thing I think is honestly going to save us, we're going to have Mark Hughes in there. I believe we're going to get at least a few points. I don't even know if we're going to get wins for the rest of the season. But when you look at the three below us, I think they have just as difficult of a schedule as we do, playing the likes of some of the bottom half teams, but also some of the top five. So I think if things go in our way, they've been struggling. We've been struggling. Hopefully the infusion of some new energy can do it. I'm optimistic now that we're going to stay up.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, and let's get out of here. We're the last ones in the room. Special thanks to Dave for taking the time to do that. We did manage to sneak away for a few beers a couple of nights later. We could have taken the microphones then, I guess, but we just chose to just have a conversation, just talk about stuff. And it was really good just to be able to hang out with another Southampton fan. Said it 1,000 times on here before, especially on this episode. It doesn't happen very often. So we have made the decision, or the pact, that we will find a way to get together for an actual match, a live match sometime next season. We'll make sure that we can do that. And whether it's here or there or somewhere in between, we'll just make sure it happens. And now we're going to move on to my interview with Jim Salveson. And so far we've heard from Saints fans who overall are pretty happy with the hiring of Mark Hughes. And like I said, it's not everybody is excited about it, but the next kind of perspective we're going to hear is from somebody who has been around for a while and has been close to, I should say, Hughes's work at Manchester City. And so we'll talk with him about that. Also talk with him a little bit about his podcast. And if you haven't checked out the On the Left Side podcast, I strongly encourage you to do so. Download the latest episode, give it a chance. I think once you do that, you will be hooked. And so let's go ahead and do that. And oh, by the way, the episode they did last Thursday was all about Jamie Carragher and Mauricio Pellegrino being sacked. So go ahead and check that one out. Jim talks about it a little bit during the episode. I recorded this in my hotel room. I kicked my roommate out, and it was not the best of setups. I think I took a picture and posted it somewhere, but his sound comes through brilliantly because he knows what he's doing. My sound sounds like an amateur podcaster because that is exactly what I am. But nonetheless, thanks for talking to me, Jim. If you're listening to this, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And special thanks to Ant for setting all of this up, and also recommending SpeakPipe, which allowed me to record the voices of the wonderful guests that you heard at the beginning of the show. So let's jump into the interview and my chat with Jim Salveson. Once again, he's on Twitter at Mr. Jim Bob. He hosts the On the Left Side podcast, and all the links and stuff are in the show notes below. So we are here with Jim Salveson. I'd like to welcome Jim to the Southampton Delivery podcast. Jim works up in Manchester. He's a radio presenter and also hosts and produces On the Left Side with Ant McGinley. And you guys say that On the Left Side is an alternative football show. And as we welcome you to the show, can you give us a little bit of insight as to where that came from and kind of what sets your show apart from maybe a traditional football show?
Yeah, do you know, we called it an alternative football show because I was scared of saying it was a funny football show, because I'm not a comedian. And to actually go out there and go, do you know what? We're really funny. We're going to tell you some jokes is a really terrifying thing to do in the first place. So we went, we'll call it an alternative show. We'll do something that other football podcasts aren't doing. And there's so many football podcasts like yours who do a fantastic job, who deliver fan chat and debate and a very long form conversations. And we wanted to do something a little bit different to that. We wanted to do something that wasn't bothered about the score in the most recent game, wasn't bothered about which player played out of his skin, that wasn't bothered about the statistics behind it. We wanted to do something that looked at the kind of bizarre stuff in football. We had a TV show over here in the 90s called Fantasy Football League. I don't know if it reached the States, but it had hosted by two comedians, very funny guys called Frank Skinner and David Baddiel, and they just poked fun at football. And that's long gone now. But it was, for most football fans, it's a really kind of important TV show, and people think about it very fondly. And I kind of wanted to recreate a little bit of that feeling as a podcast. So that's what we set out to do.
Well, I mean, that explains it. And I think you've done a fantastic job. And I had the opportunity to speak to you, I think last year on the radio show. And through that, I found the podcast, and I've been a subscriber, kind of ever since. And it is one of those things that after I listen to, some of the bigger podcasts that are out there than the more kind of traditional vein, after I listen to all those, it's nice to, for me, it reaches me usually Sunday night, and I get it. And it's like, oh, here we go. This is great. And it's a good way to, kind of debrief from everything else. And I enjoy it. So thank you for making that show. Because I, for one, am a huge fan. But sometimes I don't think you guys get maybe enough credit, because you do tend to weave in stories, and there's a little bit of a lesson in there and things to consider. And I think that, I don't know, I'm sure you consciously do that. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, we try and cover as much as possible. And there's we don't necessarily look at funny stories. That's the thing. For a funny football show, we're not looking at stories about something that's happened in the South African third division where a dog's eaten a corner flag or something. That's great, that stuff. But it's not the kind of stories we look at. We poke fun at things that are actually going on in the game, and the little narratives, and particularly the Premier League it's a pantomime. You've got villains and you've got heroes and you've ridiculous stuff going on every time. And we like to pull the characters from those stories. And as you say, occasionally there are lessons in there to be taught. And I think particularly one of the things we like doing is kind of poking fun at the way our media treats stories, because we have the tabloid media over here in the UK that often deals with people in, I don't want to use the word despicable ways, but unfairly. I mean, there's a scenario at the moment that's going on where, for some reason, young black footballers are constantly being criticised for their spending habits. And they'll be criticised if, like Raheem Sterling, who plays for Manchester City, was recently criticised for going into Primark and buying a jumper. And everyone said, oh, how dare a multi-millionaire footballer be such a skinflint as to go into this budget clothes shop to spend his clothes. And then similarly, he bought a expensive supercar and he was criticised for spending too much money. And those kind of hypocritical double standards are constant in the media and the way they tell stories and the way they report the non-footballing side of football. So sometimes it feels like we kind of want to make a bit of a political stand, a little bit. I mean, it's a hell of a comparison to make, and I'd never want to compare ourselves to the Daily Show and what Jon Stewart does, but the way he delivers stuff, and he'll go, I'm going to be funny, I'm going to tell you some jokes, but at the same time, I want you to take this away from the story we're telling. I kind of think we hope to achieve something like that sometimes. Yeah,
that's a much better explanation than I gave you. And that, and I can agree that is kind of, that's kind of what I get the sense of when I listen. And, so that I think it's great. And, before we go any further, I just want to tell you thank you for joining the show and taking some time to chat with me, about this and Mark Hughes. And, cause of course Hughes was up in Manchester City, for some time. Yes. And so you probably have a few stories. Is there?
Well, do you know what? Mark Hughes' time at Manchester City, I think, can mostly be described as forgettable. I think that would be the best phrase to describe it. And you've got to remember, for a start, that Man City fans don't remember anything before 2008. Right. That was when the club was founded. Nothing happened before 2008. I don't actually mean that. I want to be able to go out in Manchester again. There is a history, and there are some very passionate fans, Man City fans. They have obviously got new fans since the money and the success came in, but there is a diehard and very passionate fan base there as well. But I was trying to think back to Mark Hughes at the club, and he was only there for around 12 months, I think, and it was when the money first came in. So he bought a few significant players. I think he bought Tevez to the club. I think he bought Nigel de Jong to the club. But I can't remember anything about how he played or the style of football or whether they were successful during that period. So I went on Twitter earlier and I asked people to describe Mark Hughes' tenure in 3 words. And I've got 3 examples for you. So the first person said very few goals. The second person said he was okay. And the third person said waste of space. So I think if you bear those descriptions in mind, and bear in mind he had some cash to spend as well. So he had money to buy players and kind of put his stamp on things. It doesn't fill me with confidence for his tenure at Southampton, I don't think.
Yeah, that's not what I wanted to hear.
I would have thought so.
After the past, almost 2 full seasons of football, the style of football that we've played, it hasn't been great for us. And I was really hoping we were going to get something different. And I think maybe most of us just look at what he did at Stoke and think, hey, he had Shaqiri, he had Arnautovic, and, he got them playing. He took them from Tony Pulis to just playing long balls to actually trying to play football and some decent finishes in there. So hopefully, we're going in that direction, but we'll see.
I think you'd argue when he first came to the club Tony Pulis left him with quite a solid team. There was a decent team there when Mark Hughes took over at Stoke. And the first few seasons, when he started to play nice football, and people went, oh, there's a bit of development here, something's happening. We've not just lobbed it forward. The ball's actually seeing the centre of the pitch every now and again, not just at the kickoff times. And then for the first 2 seasons, it started to happen. And then it just stalled and stopped. And there was no more development, and he bought bad players. And so I think most Stoke fans would also describe, apart from this season, which is horribly unforgettable, that I think they'd describe his tenure at Stoke as pretty forgettable as well. Yeah, no,
when we kind of looked through their Twitter accounts, they just basically said that this is a bad call. Then you're going to be disappointed. And it was like, well, and Southampton Twitter has been pretty negative for the past 2 years. And so I think we're all trying to be positive, and he's saying the right things, and he looks like the fittest person on the pitch at practice. And
that's not a good thing.
No.
The manager's your fittest person is not the best thing.
So I know there were concerns at Stoke that people weren't fit, but it's like, man, if he's that fit, hopefully he just gets the guys working, and hopefully he can just inspire him, because Pellegrino was very kind of zen and wasn't really kind of the man motivator, and I think that's what we need with 8 games to go. So we'll see. But is he one of those guys that Saints haven't always hired the known coaches, the people who have been around the English game, and for a little bit that I worry that they're kind of reverting back to they're going to be a mid-table team now. They're going to maybe stop that challenge. They're going to stop trying to sign the next best manager from Europe or something like that, and they're going to go with just the proper football man. Do you see Hughes as being the proper football man?
I think he's on the edge of being the proper football man, or the PFM, as I like to call it. I think the PFM is it's a remarkable footballing thing. The one thing that when you appoint a proper football man, Paul Merson is going to be happy, because you haven't got given the job to one of those funny foreign lot. So Merson's happy, so that's the main thing. But it's a weird one, isn't it? It kind of goes hand in hand with that myth that English managers don't really get a proper crack in English football. And they don't get a proper crack in English football because they're not very good. They just seem to be handed round between the bottom few clubs. You've got Pardew, you've got Pulis, you've got Allardyce, you've got Moyes, and you've probably got Hughes in there as well. They just kind of, one gets sacked, then he moves into another one who's just been sacked, and they kind of just rotate around those bottom 6 or 7 clubs until they get sacked a few weeks later, and then take the payout, and then inexplicably get given a job somewhere else a few weeks after that. No sport rewards failure in quite the same way that football rewards failure. It's incredible. If I worked in Tesco's and I kept on putting beans on the shelf where the cornflakes were going, someone wouldn't come up to me a day after I've been sacked and go, we know you put beans on the cornflakes packet all the time in Tesco's, but come and work in this other supermarket. Come and work in Sainsbury's, because we think this time you're going to get the beans in the right place. It's remarkable. I don't understand how people just keep on going for the same managers who prove they're not up to the job time and time again, yet they come back in and get a job. And I think there's something with the proper football man and I think fans are kind of responsible for this a little bit, because they seem to think the problems at any football club can be solved by running around a bit more and trying a little bit harder. And I remember Tony Adams, who is the ultimate proper football man, he got given a job in the Spanish league with Granada. And he said in his press conference, 100% genuinely, he was asked what he was going to do with Granada to keep them in the La Liga. And he said he's going to kick some ass, which the underlying message there is the Spanish are all lazy. I'm English. I'm going to show them how to do a proper day's work. And that sums up the proper football man for me. It's all about making people work. It's not about tactics or plans or transfers. It's about making people work a bit harder. And maybe it'll work and maybe it won't. But I have the impression that it probably won't.
No, and that definitely runs out after a little bit, that it can only get you so far.
But the great thing about the proper football man, the really beautiful thing about having someone appointed like this, isn't it happened with David Moyes at West Ham, and it happened with Sam Allardyce at Everton. When they come in, no one expects anything. No one expects, and you said it earlier, you're going to give up trying to achieve the next thing and be happy with just staying in the Premier League. That's what the proper football man does. And so all the fans now, expectations are on the floor. So if you stay up, everyone will be delighted because the expectations are so low. That's the magic of the proper football man.
And that's stark contrast to what we had before. But you mentioned that maybe the football at Manchester City that he played wasn't maybe as great, but we've definitely had some bad, and not bad, just possession based, very slow, very methodical. And so if I can ask you to kind of describe the football you think he will bring to the South Coast on a scale of Jamie Carragher's spittle to Graziano Pella, like where does it fall in there?
Wow. Incidentally, the whole timing of Pellegrino's sacking is perfect, it being the same day as the Jamie Carragher incident, because you had this beautiful comparison between Jamie Carragher spitting on a 14-year-old girl and keeping his job, yet Pellegrino just played kind of disappointing football and getting sacked. And you'd argue that probably spitting on a 14-year-old girl is the worst crime of those things. Yeah, but I loved the timing there. But will he play better football than Pellegrino? I mean, a monkey in a suit would probably play better football than Pellegrino. So although Hughes will probably play better football, I think going with the monkey might have been the better choice at the end of the day. I mean, it wouldn't be difficult to upgrade the football that Southampton are playing or have been playing under their last manager. So, and as we said, he did it at Stoke. He turned Stoke from a rugby team into a football team for a couple of years, and it looked pretty good. So maybe if that's what the fans want, they might be able to upgrade him. But it might be an upgrade in football. But the question is, does Southampton have the players to be able to play a more attractive style of football? And if Southampton do have those players and do have players that are capable of playing that type of football, why haven't they sold them to Liverpool yet? Because surely that's down the line. That's going to happen soon enough.
Maybe if Hughes does well enough, he'll go. Maybe we'll do that.
yeah, that'll be the dream.
If you had to pick a manager WWE E style tag team duo, who would you pair with Hughes, and do you think they would take any of the other managers out there in its kind of tag team world title match?
I reckon. Well, you was already mentioned that Hughes is pretty fit. He looks like he could still play a bit of football, and I think I saw him score an overhead kick in a training video for Stoke. So he's kind of wily, he's fast, he's fit, but he hasn't got a lot of body strength. So I reckon you whack him in a ring with Big Sam Allardyce, who would be the ideal WWE wrestler anyway. Mm-hmm. So I'm going for Big Sam and Mark Hughes. They could be traditional big man, little man job. You've got Big Sam's brawn, you've got Mark Hughes' speed and finesse, and then they can win and they can go off and celebrate with a pint of wine and a Chinese buffet or something afterwards.
I think that'd
really
be great.
Get stuck into that. Special move would be the payoff.
Yeah.
So because obviously they get sacked and they get a massive payoff. So the finishing move they do would be the payoff. I don't know what that would be.
It'll be great either way. And I guess one more question for you. Is Hughes more likely to injure a player by slide tackling him in training, have to be restrained from going after an opposing coach in the technical area, refuse to give a kid an autograph, or keep Southampton in the Premier League? Which of those is the most likely?
Wow. All of them I'm going to go with, apart from D. I think he's got, I think he's got more, his move to Southampton, ironically, has got more chance of keeping Stoke in the Premier League, which is than it has Southampton. I think I was watching his press conference and he was saying how he had got many points in the Premier League previously, but it was like he was under the misconception that he gets to keep those points, that he gets to bring them with him. So he'll take his 400 points he's won during his Premier League history and add them to what Southampton have got already. Go like, hey, look, we've got 420 points in the league. We're above City now. It's all fine. I can go about my business. So someone needs to explain to him that it doesn't really work like that. But I don't know. I kind of get the impression that Southampton might have appointed him purely because he has a load of red and white ties already. Because I can't fathom that he is the man necessarily to keep. He doesn't seem to be the kind of guy who's going to go there and instantly have an impact. We've compared him with his time at Stoke and where he tried to change the style of football, but it was a slow process. Right. And it wasn't instantaneous. There wasn't a direct impact when he went there. And we've talked about how the fans' expectations are going to be lowered. And you've got to think about that from a player's point of view. Are the players sitting in that dressing room going to be inspired by the appointment of Mark Hughes? And I'm not sure he's the kind of man that, because that's what you want. You want them at this stage in the season. You want the bounce. You want the manager to go in there, inspire the players, and get them to basically up their games to that mythical footballing 110% for the last few games of the season. Because that's the way you'll stay in this division. And I can't see that happening. But that said, I think there are 3 worse teams than Southampton in the league. So I hope because I like Southampton. I think they're a nice team. They've got good history. They've developed so many England players. They're constantly playing youth team players, and they've been horribly mismanaged by a board who have sold all their assets systematically through the years without actually bringing in any new talent. And no fans deserve that. It's like they've got a nice car, but then they've decided to sell the wheels and then the engine and then the gearbox, and they're still expecting that car to be able to win the Indy 500. It doesn't work like that, football. And so I think the fans deserve the club to stay up, and I hope for that sake that they do.
Yeah, no, we all do, but I think the perspective that you have on this is a good one, in that you look at how he starts at most teams and it's not great. And right now you only have 8 games to save the season. So whether he changes his approach when he comes in, or he tries to just do what he's done in the past, will kind of be the difference. And all we can do at this point is we all wanted the manager out, we all wanted Pellegrino out, and so this is what you get. And we all wanted Puel out, and we got Pellegrino. So hopefully it's a step up from that. Hopefully it goes the opposite direction. But that's, at this point we made a decision, and now we're just hoping we can stay in. And yeah, I mean, maybe Hayes got some other, maybe he's got some motivation to try to put Stoke down, since they got rid of him this year. But we'll see.
And they pulled out the fire before. I mean, when Pochettino was appointed and when Koeman was appointed, nobody was particularly expecting a massive amount for them.
Right.
And they achieved great things. So maybe this is the move that will propel Hughes from being the proper football man, from one of the also-ran managers, into that next level. And maybe he will go to Liverpool. Who knows?
All right. Well, Jim, can you tell everybody where they can find the show, your show, and where they can find you on Twitter and all that stuff?
You can find the show, everywhere, wherever you use to listen, whatever you're using to listen to this podcast now. In fact, if you search On the Left Side, you'll find us. If you search Funny Football, we'll probably be in the mix there somewhere. And you can find our Twitter account at On the Left Side is on there, on social media as well.
All right. And new shows every Monday, Thursday?
Yep, every Monday and Thursday until the end of the season. And then we'll probably take a little bit of a rest and be back for the World Cup in Russia to chart England's disappointing campaign then as well.
And there won't be anything to talk about there, right? Nothing's going to happen.
No. They usually pass without any incident at all, World Cups. So I'm sure there'll be no fan trouble or anything. It'll be fine.
Yeah, it'd be great. Well, Jim, I appreciate you taking the time to join the show and talk with us a little bit. I hope try to make it a little bit funny for you, but we'll see how it goes.
Thanks for having us. Cheers, Matt.
Cheers. And once again, thank you to Mr. Jim Salveson. He's at Mr._Jim Bob on Twitter. You can also find him at On the Left Side. The links are in the show notes. And Jim writes and produces On the Left Side along with Ant McGinley for Abrupt Audio. All things I suggest you check out if you are interested at all in funny football podcasts or other podcasts. And that was super special for me. I'm sure you could tell. It was very early in the morning. My voice was pretty shot from being at the conference and things like that. But Jim stuck with me through it, and I appreciate that. Can't explain to you how fun that was. And I wish we could have talked for longer, but we couldn't. And last thing for this show, because of course, even after all of that, Southampton still had to go to Wigan on Sunday. I drove home late Saturday night so that I could be home for the match to be able to watch it. And it was a pleasure to be able to watch, but the interview that we had kind of set up for that kind of fell through. People got busy, and then I hadn't seen my family in 5 days. It was kind of not really possible for me to sneak away and find an opportunity to record. But I did get a chance to talk with Dan Jarvis, who is a Southampton season ticket holder along with his dad. They go to almost every match, and there's a pretty cool story there, but we'll save that for another time. But anyway, I asked Dan to maybe tell me a little bit about his journey and about the match, what stood out, and kind of expecting just 30-second, minute-long kind of recap of the match. And what Dan sent over to me is brilliant, and so I'm just going to play it in its entirety here. I didn't do anything to it. I just compressed it a little bit and raised the volume just a tad so you can hear it all. And this is Dan's kind of story about the match, about the Wigan match, about what he saw, what he felt, and I think you'll enjoy it. And then this is the last kind of thing I will play for you, and then I'll talk to you at the very end of the show. So once again, this is Dan Jarvis. He's on Twitter at Dan Jarvis SFC91. Thank you so much, Dan, for being willing to do this. And now Here's his take on the Wigan match and kind of everything else that led up to it.
Wigan away. Where do I start? Admittedly, initially we were under the cosh, but I think we showed great character, remaining resilient, and clearly the words of new managerial arrival Mark Hughes inspired at half-time, something sadly Pellegrino was never able to achieve. I thought Sparky got his tactics spot on, popularly starting two up top, including Gabbiadini, and his substitutions were both sensible and well-timed. But that's what the experience of an old-school British manager who's overseen 450-plus Premier League matches will get you. Particularly second half, we moved the ball at a much higher tempo, and with purpose. Without getting carried away, already the signs are promising, having made the coaching change. Individual performance-wise, I thought Pierre Højbjerg was phenomenal, forever committed and full of running. He deserved his goal, despite accidentally kicking Jack Stevens in the delicates during the celebrations. And with the maturity he displays both on the pitch and off during interviews, I feel as though he genuinely has potential to one day become club captain. Also interesting to note, that was the first Saints goal for both Højbjerg and Cedric. Amazing for Cedric in particular, as he's never been able to hit the proverbial barn door, and his shots usually end up in row Z. Where he's been hiding that prowess in front of goal, I do not know, but hopefully we'll see more of it. Last of all, to the fans. In excess of 4,000 plus making 450-mile trip to Lancashire in Arctic conditions, dodging jackknife lorries, hopelessly stuck Audis. My partner, to her credit, even had to push Dad and I up a hill in Swindon to keep the dream of making the game alive. Every single one of you deserve all the credit in the world for continuing to provide support during a thoroughly difficult season. The vocal backing alone warranted us progression into the next round, particularly of Manola Gabbiadini, in an attempt to pick him up following the penalty miss. Our incredible fan base, unequivocally loyal and passionate, undoubtedly makes Southampton one of the greatest clubs around. And if Ralph Kruger deems labelling us a small club justifiable, he needs to think again. I only wish he had attended yesterday in order to witness otherwise firsthand. Up the Saints.
That does it for episode 63 of the Southampton Delivery Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed it. Special thanks to all of the guests who took time to leave a voicemail, talk with me on Skype, or sit down with me at a conference. The show doesn't happen without you. It's my pleasure to be able to share just some time with you above anything else. The show is kind of secondary. It's the relationship that's there, getting to talk with each and every one of you that I really, really look forward to and I really enjoy. So thank you. I can't really explain how much it means to me. So the last person you heard, like I said before, was Dan Jarvis. He and his father attend almost every match. They're season ticket holders. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant and a good way to end the show. This show, as always, is partnered with the Saints Report. For all of your Southampton FC news and needs, be sure to check out the Saints Report on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. You will not be disappointed. The artwork for the show is done by the We Are Southampton page on Instagram. For all your matchday edits, polls, competitions, and more, be sure to check out the We Are Southampton page on Instagram. Matt, who runs the page, has been a guest on the show. As I said, he does the artwork. It's a fantastic page, so go ahead and head over there and check it out. All of the music on the show comes courtesy of the Free Music Archive at freemusicarchive.org. The intro song is Epic Song by Boxcat Games. The end of show credits that you're listening to now is Aim is True by Poddington Bear. The links are in the show notes if you are interested. And if you are enjoying this show, please be sure to subscribe wherever you listen so that you do not miss future episodes. We'll be back next week with another episode, and the week after that, and the week after that, and the week after that. You get the idea. Anyway, get in touch with us on social media at SFCDELL_IVERY. If you've been a subscriber for some time, please consider leaving a review on iTunes. It really helps other people find out about the show. And like I said, there's a link at the very bottom of the show notes where you can call in and let us know your feelings. Maybe you'd rather do that than write a review. That is just fine. But until next time, thank you for listening, and remember that together, we march on.